Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're tackling something I know many listeners grapple with, thinking and speaking English. Well, fluently.
Yeah, the big one.
The sources you sent over this week really highlight why so many learners get caught in what we're calling the translation trap.
The translation trap. That's a good way to put it.
But more importantly, they offer some really practical ways to start, thinking directly in English.
Exactly, and that's the key, isn't it? Shifting that internal process.
So our mission today is basically to unpack these techniques, give you some concrete strategies you can actually use right away to communicate better, more confidently too.
Absolutely. And this translation trap, it's fascinating how common it is. The sources show it's almost like the default for learners starting out.
Right. You hear English.
You translate it to your native language, you think of your answer there.
And then you have to translate it back into English before you even say anything.
Exactly. It's this whole multi-step thing that, well, it just slows you right down.
It sounds incredibly mentally demanding, doesn't it? Like trying to run, complex software on a really old computer.
That's a great analogy.
Mm-hmm.
And while it's totally understandable as a starting point, as the sources point out, it becomes a real barrier later on, to getting that smooth, natural flow.
So the goal then is this shift towards thinking in English.
Yeah, that's what the sources are all about, where the English words and phrases just pop into your head directly. No intermediate step.
Like seeing a dog and just thinking, dog.
Precisely. Not pero, then dog, or whatever your native word is, or feeling hungry, and the thought is just, I'm hungry. It's great there.
No detour through another language.
None.
So it's about making English feel less like a code you're constantly deciphering.
Right.
And more like the natural language your brain uses when you're actually in that English mode.
You got it. Like it becomes the operating system for that context.
And the benefits for listeners, according to the materials you shared, they're pretty significant, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. One of the biggest things the sources highlight is just faster comprehension. Makes sense, doesn't it?
Yeah, you cut out a whole step.
Exactly. You process things more directly. And for speaking, well, your responses get quicker, more natural sounding too.
Because the words are just there, more available.
Right. They're not stuck behind that mental translation bottleneck anymore.
Okay, now here's something that really jumped out at me from the sources. They talk about how thinking in English leads to English that actually sounds more natural. Why is that?
Well, it's fascinating because, languages aren't just word-for-word equivalents. They have their own structures, their own idioms.
Their own ways of putting things together.
Precisely. And if you translate directly, you often end up with sentences that might be grammatically okay, but they just sound a bit off, a bit clunky to a native speaker.
Right, like strong T versus powerful T.
Exactly. Thinking in English helps you internalize that natural rhythm, those common word pairings, collocations, like you said, and idioms that just don't translate literally. You start to get a feel for what sounds right in English.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like learning the unspoken rules, the nuances.
Uh-huh.
And I can imagine when you start expressing yourself more naturally like that, your confidence must get a real boost.
Absolutely. When you understand quicker, respond quicker, and sound more natural, it builds this sense of competence. It reduces that hesitation, that feeling of searching for words.
Yeah, that anxiety a lot of learners feel, that struggle to keep up or get the words out smoothly.
Thinking in English is a huge part of bridging that gap.
Okay, so we get the why. Faster, more natural, more confident communication. Let's dive into the how. The sources were packed with really useful strategies here. Where should someone start?
Well, a really consistent theme was starting small. Integrate English into your everyday life, but in manageable ways. Consistency seems to be the absolute key.
Right, not trying to do everything at once.
Exactly. And one of the simplest but really effective techniques mentioned is just consciously labeling things around you. Internally, in English.
Can you walk us through that, like a practical example?
Sure. Say you're sitting at your desk right now. Instead of thinking the word for desk in your native language, you deliberately think the English word, desk.
Okay.
Then look around window, wall, light, book, phone. When you go outside, tree, car, sky, flower, bird.
Ah, I see. So you're creating that direct link between the thing and the English word, bypassing translation.
Exactly. It's very low pressure. Just you and your thoughts building those basic connections.
That sounds really accessible, a good first step. What comes after that? What's the next logical step?
The sources suggest moving on to internally narrating simple actions using basic English like simple present or present continuous.
Okay, so like, if I'm making coffee.
Yeah. You might think to yourself, okay, I'm opening the fridge, I'm taking out the milk, now I'm pouring the milk. Or I fill the kettle, the water boils, I pour the water. Simple stuff.
Like giving yourself a running commentary inside your head, but in English.
You got it. It's a clever way to practice basic sentence structures in real time, linked to what you're actually doing.
That makes sense. It connects the language to the action.
Right. It gets you used to linking verbs and patterns directly, like a quiet English soundtrack to your day. Another really powerful strategy the sources highlight is creating an immersive environment.
Ah, immersion. Now, people often think that means, packing up and moving abroad, but the sources suggest you can create that environment anywhere, right?
That's a really important point. Immersion here means intentionally surrounding yourself with English as much as possible wherever you are.
So how do you do that? What are the practical tips?
Well, several things. Changing the language settings on your phone, your computer, social media.
Yeah.
That forces you to interact with your digital world in English.
Oh, that's a good one. Simple but effective.
Definitely. Then there's consuming media in English. Movies, TV shows. Maybe start with English subtitles.
Right, to connect the sound and the text.
Yeah, then maybe try turning them off as you get more comfortable. Listen to English music, podcasts. Hopefully this one.
We hope so.
And pay attention not just to the words, but the rhythm, the flow, how it all sounds together.
The sources also really stress reading regularly in English. What kind of stuff should people read?
They suggest starting with things you're actually interested in. News articles on topics you like, blogs about your hobbies, maybe simple novels or short stories.
Okay, so find something engaging.
Exactly. And the key, especially at first, is not to get totally bogged down trying to understand every single word.
Ah, right. Don't stop and look up everything.
Try not to, initially. Focus on the main idea. Let your brain kind of absorb the language passively. Constantly stopping to translate breaks your flow and makes it feel like a chore.
That's really helpful advice. It's so tempting to look up every unknown word.
It is. But try to guess the meaning from the context first. If a word keeps popping up and seems crucial, then look it up. And when you do, the sources strongly recommend using an English-to-English dictionary, like Merriam-Webster, Oxford Learners, Cambridge.
Instead of one that translates back to your native language, why is that better?
Because it keeps you thinking within the English framework. You see the definition in English, example sentences in English. It helps you grasp the nuance, how the word connects to other English words, rather than just finding a single equivalent in your language, which might not always fit perfectly.
I see. It forces you to stay in that English operating system.
Precisely. It encourages thinking within the system itself.
Okay, so we've got these more passive immersion strategies, labeling, narrating, media, reading, dictionaries. What about more active exercises, things that really push your brain to produce thoughts in English?
Right. Active production is key, too. The sources really highlight keeping a simple journal or diary in English.
Oh, interesting. Does it have to be long entries?
Not at all. Just a few sentences each day. What you did, how you're feeling, plans for tomorrow. Simple stuff.
Yeah. But that forces you to actually recall words and build sentences yourself, doesn't it? Even if it's just for you.
Exactly. It pushes you from just understanding to actively producing. And it's great for spotting gaps like, oh, I don't know the word for this, or how do I structure that?
A low-pressure way to practice output. Makes sense. Any other active techniques?
Yeah. Another one mentioned is consciously making simple decisions in English, like deciding what to eat for lunch.
How would that work?
You'd have that little internal debate, but in English. Should I have the pasta or the sandwich? The pasta sounds good, but maybe the sandwich is quicker. Okay, sandwich it is.
Huh. That's clever. Weaving English thinking into those tiny everyday moments.
Yeah, where the stakes are super low, it makes it less like a formal study time.
And more integrated into just life.
Right. The goal is to make it part of the fabric of your daily thoughts. The sources also suggest actively thinking about your hobbies or interests in English.
Ah. Okay, so if you like cooking,
think through the recipe steps in English. If you like football, maybe mentally summarize the last match in English, or think about the rules.
Using vocabulary you probably already have some familiarity with. That makes it easier to start.
Exactly. Leverage what you know. So we've got quite a toolkit now for cultivating this thinking in English habit.
We do. Now let's make that crucial link to actually speaking better. How does all this mental practice translate into, smoother talking?
Well, the link is really direct and powerful. The better you get at forming thoughts directly in English.
The less you hesitate when you speak.
Exactly. That little pause, that mental processing time while you're translating, It shrinks a lot.
So your speech just becomes more fluid, less stop-start.
Precisely. You're not constantly hitting those little roadblocks while your brain plays catch up with the translation.
But as the sources point out, thinking in English is crucial. But it's not the whole story for speaking fluently, is it?
No, it's a vital foundation. But you absolutely need active speaking practice, too. It's quite common to be able to think in English okay inside your head, but still feel awkward or freeze up when you actually try to speak out loud.
Right, that gap between internal thought and external speech. So what specific strategies do the sources suggest for actually improving the spoken part, building on that thinking base?
Well, the first step, maybe the most fundamental, is just start speaking. Even if it's just talking to yourself at home.
Really? Just talking to yourself?
Yeah. Get comfortable with the physical act, forming the sounds, hearing your own voice speaking English.
Okay. For someone maybe without regular practice partners, what else can they do solo?
The sources have a few good ones. Reading aloud is great. Take those articles or books we mentioned and just read parts out loud.
How does that help?
Helps with pronunciation, rhythm, connecting the written word to the sound. Then there's thinking aloud. Remember the internal narration. Just say it out loud instead. Okay, I'm making breakfast now.
Verbalizing the inner monologue.
Exactly. And then there's a really effective technique called shadowing.
Shadowing? That sounds intriguing. What is it?
It's where you listen to a native English speaker, like a short audio clip from a podcast or audiobook.
Okay.
And you try to repeat exactly what they're saying right after them, almost like an echo, mimicking their pronunciation, intonation, rhythm, everything.
Wow, okay. Trying to match the music of the language.
Precisely. You might need to pause, repeat sections, but it's fantastic for improving your prosody, your natural sound.
Okay, so speaking to yourself, reading aloud, shadowing. But the sources also really push finding actual speaking partners, don't they? That can feel like a big hurdle.
It can feel daunting, absolutely.
Yeah.
But it's pretty crucial for really developing fluency. The sources mention several ways to find people.
Like what?
Language exchange apps and websites are huge now. Tandem, HelloTalk, italki. You connect with native speakers who might be learning your language, so it's a swap.
A win-win.
Totally. Also, online communities or forums about your hobbies. People are just chatting in English there naturally. Look for local conversation clubs or meetups, too.
Right, face-to-face practice.
Yeah. Or, of course, online or in-person conversation classes offer structured practice.
When you do find partners, what's the best mindset? It's easy to get worried about mistakes.
That's the key thing. Shift your focus. It's about communication, not perfection. Can you understand each other? Can you get your idea across? That's the goal.
Mistakes are just part of learning.
Absolutely. View them as chances to learn. Don't let the fear of a grammar slip or mispronouncing something stop you from actually trying to speak.
The sources also had some practical tips for those speaking situations.
They did. Like, if you know you've got a meeting or a social thing coming up where you'll use English,
Yeah.
take a few minutes beforehand. Think about likely topics. Jot down some relevant vocabulary or phrases. Not a script. Just prep a little. Feel more ready.
Reduces the on-the-spot pressure a bit.
Exactly. And learning common conversational phrases or chunks is really helpful too.
Chunks. Like what?
Things like greetings, ways to give your opinion, how to agree or disagree politely, asking for clarification. Phrases like, get the hang of it, or, on the other hand, could you say that again? They help conversations flow.
Makes sense. And one technique that sounded maybe a bit odd, but the sources recommended it, recording yourself.
Yes. Use your phone, record yourself speaking English for a few minutes, maybe summarize an article, talk about your day.
And then the scary part.
Then you listen back. It can be incredibly revealing. You notice things about your pronunciation, your intonation, maybe how often you say things you're totally unaware of while speaking.
Objective feedback, basically.
Exactly. You can then pinpoint areas you want to work on.
So how does all this speaking practice feed back into the thinking in English part? They're linked, aren't they?
Oh, absolutely linked. They reinforce each other constantly. It's a positive feedback loop. Well, the more you practice those thinking in English techniques, the easier it is to find the words and phrases when you need to speak. They just come more readily.
Right. Less searching.
And conversely, the more you actually speak English, the more you force your brain to think in English in real time. It solidifies those mental pathways you've been building.
So thinking practice makes speaking easier.
And speaking practice makes thinking more automatic.
Got it. It's that positive cycle the sources emphasize. Now, this whole process, it's not always smooth sailing, is it? What are some common bumps in the road?
Definitely not always smooth. Limited vocabulary is a really common one.
What's the advice there?
Kind of two things. First, learn to work with what you do have. Get good at describing things if you don't know the exact word circumlocution. It's a useful skill anyway.
Right. Talking around it.
Yeah. And second, actively build your vocabulary. Consistent reading, listening, learning words in context, not just lists.
Okay. What about grammar worries? So many learners stress about grammar.
Huge stressor. The advice is generally, prioritize communication over perfect grammar, especially when you start speaking. Focus on getting the main common structures right. You'll internalize more grammar naturally through more exposure reading and listening.
So understanding and being understood is more important than perfect sentences initially.
Pretty much. You can do targeted practice on specific weak points later, but don't let grammar fear paralyze you. And then there's pronunciation.
Yeah, worries about accent or not being clear.
The key message from the sources is, aim for clarity over a perfect native accent. Focus on sounds that are tricky for you. Work on word stress, and intonation shadowing helps a lot here.
Because stress and intonation really affect understanding, right?
Massively. And remember, having an accent is completely normal. Everyone has one. Clarity is the goal.
The sources also mention some specific anxieties, like people who understand English well passively, reading or listening, but their mind goes blank when they try to speak.
Yeah, that passive versus active skill gap, it's really common.
What can they do?
The advice is to lower the stakes. Start speaking in really low-pressure situations. Practice actively retrieving words using those thinking exercises. Just acknowledge the anxiety is normal. Build confidence gradually. Start small, celebrate the small wins.
Okay. Another big question learners always have, how long does it take? How long until I start really thinking in English?
The million-dollar question.
Yeah.
And the sources are clear. There's no single answer, no magic number.
Depends on the person. Practice, exposure.
Exactly. All those individual factors. But what they do emphasize is consistency. Even 15, 30 minutes of focused practice daily adds up. You'll likely start noticing small shifts, maybe in weeks or months.
So focus on the consistency, not a deadline.
Precisely. It's a gradual process.
One last common question. Is it okay to practice speaking with other non-native speakers? Or should you only practice with natives?
Good question. The sources suggest practicing with other learners can actually be really good.
Oh, why?
It builds confidence. You might feel less intimidated. It increases your sheer speaking time, and you share that learning experience.
But there's a but, isn't there?
There is. It's also really important to mix it up. Get practice with native or very proficient speakers, too. That's where you really pick up natural phrasing, refine pronunciation, get exposed to more idioms.
So a balance is best.
Ideally, yes. Both have their benefits.
Okay, this has been incredibly thorough, a real deep dive into thinking and speaking. If we had to boil it down, what are the absolute key takeaways for our listener?
I think the core message is, thinking in English is a learnable skill. It's not some magic ability.
Right. You can develop it.
Absolutely. Start small, but be consistent. Immerse yourself however you can. Practice both the thinking and the speaking. Actively, they feed each other.
And be patient.
Definitely be patient. And curious. Treat it like an exploration. It's a journey, not a race to the finish line.
And that practical tip from the sources. Pick just one strategy we talked about today. Just one.
Yeah, make it manageable.
And commit to doing it this week. Change your phone language.
Yeah.
Do the internal narration. Read one short thing aloud each day, whatever it is.
Those small, consistent actions are what build momentum and lead to real progress over time. It really works.
So as you keep going on your English journey, remember that getting to that point where you can just switch into English mode, think directly, speak more fluently, it's achievable.
Definitely within reach.
We really hope this deep dive has given you some solid insights and practical tools you can start using right away. Thanks so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Keep at it, everyone.
Until our next deep dive, keep practicing, stay curious, and keep exploring the amazing world of language.